After discovering my wife's infidelity, I switched her birth control pills. Now she's pregnant with her lover's baby and doesn't know what to do. I was sitting in front of the TV, pretending to be interested in the baseball game. It was Saturday afternoon, and Jenna and I had just finished a roast chicken she had prepared. While she washed the dishes, I stared at the screen, but I wasn't really watching the game. Every time she wasn't looking, I found myself observing her. Jenna is attractive. Not a stunning bombshell, but definitely eye-catching. She's tall, with a curvy figure and light brown hair that cascades down her back. Her large brown eyes have a way of looking at you that can make you feel special. She's always had that effect on me. We've been married for 7 years and have 2 young daughters, Emily, age 5, and Sophie, 4. We both work full-time, so my mother watches the girls during the day, and Jenna or I pick them up after work. After Sophie was born, I decided to get a vasectomy. We both agreed that 2 children were enough, but at that moment I wasn't thinking about our daughters, who were playing quietly in their room. My mind was consumed by the changes I had noticed in Jenna over the past few months. It all started with small things, her new way of dressing, more put together and striking. She also began spending more time at work. Separately, these changes didn't seem like a big deal, but together they began to unsettle me. At home, her behavior was different too. Often, when we were watching TV together and I'd make a comment, she'd give me vague answers, as if she wasn't really paying attention. Her eyes were on the screen, but it was obvious her thoughts were elsewhere. In bed, our intimate life was still active, a couple of times a week. However, some nights I'd find her restless, tossing and turning for hours before falling asleep. I sensed something was bothering her, but she wasn't telling me. I didn't want to pressure her by asking directly, fearing it would make her shut down even more. We had always been honest with each other, so I didn't understand why she was keeping things to herself this time. Jenna has always been an amazing cook. She loves experimenting with new recipes and spends a lot of time looking for inspiration online. She often chatted on cooking forums, sharing ideas and learning from others. I knew she used the nickname Jenny, a diminutive her father used to call her when she was a child. I had seen her several times at the computer, chatting in a cooking chat room. At first, I didn't think much of it, but something told me those conversations weren't just about recipes. One night, as I watched her clear the table, an idea came to me. Why not join that chat room myself? I could create a fake profile and see what they were talking about. I even thought about pretending to be someone else and talking to her without her knowing it was me. But after thinking it over, I decided that would be crossing a line. I didn't want to risk her finding out I was spying on her. A week passed, and nothing changed. Jenna remained distant, almost as if she were living in her own world. I noticed that even our daughters were struggling to get her attention. That's when I knew I needed to do something. I decided to go ahead with my idea of spying on the chat room. The next day at work, I registered on the same platform she used with the username New Mom. I thought pretending to be a woman would make others feel comfortable talking to me. I knew Jenna usually logged into the chat room around 8 p.m. after putting our daughters to bed. So that Tuesday night, I waited for her to log on and prepared to join the conversation. I went to the small room next to the bathroom, where her computer was. I told Jenna I was going down to my office to catch up on some work. She nodded distractedly, and I hurried to my den. Within minutes, I logged into the cooking chat room and waited for her username to appear. There were about 5 women already online, chatting about how to make the perfect cheesecake. 5 minutes passed, and I was still looking for Jenna's username in the participant list. Suddenly, one of the women sent me a message, asking if I had any unique cheesecake recipes. I had no idea how to bake, so I replied that I had never made one before, but was there to learn from those who knew. As I finished typing, I saw Jenna's username, Jenny, appear as the newest participant in the chat. Everyone, including her, started giving me tips on how to make a cheesecake, what kind of cheese to use, the necessary quantities, tricks to make it perfect. The chat room quickly filled up until there were about 12 people talking at once, making it hard to follow the conversation. I took a moment to ask Jenny to email me her cheesecake recipe. I gave her an email address I had created specifically for this chat. The next day at work, I found an email from her with the recipe. I was surprised because that email address was completely new to me. Jenna had never hidden anything from me before. Or so I thought. I felt guilty for the rest of the day, knowing she should never find out that new mom was actually me, her husband. However, I decided to press on. I sent her an email the next day, telling her I had tried her recipe. The cake had turned out fantastic, and my husband had loved it. We soon began exchanging emails regularly. After that, we started chatting outside the cooking chat room. We added each other as friends on the platform, which allowed us to talk anytime without needing to be in the chat. Meanwhile, at home, Jenna's behavior towards me and our daughters began to worsen. Our intimate life was also affected, reduced to once a week. Moreover, it felt distant, as if she were just going through the motions without really enjoying it. Despite everything, we continued to write and chat. Over time, I started to feel less guilty about it, but I couldn't ignore that our relationship was rapidly deteriorating. Jenna was drifting further and further away from me and our daughters, and although she was still a dedicated mother, it was clear that something else occupied her mind. I began to suspect there might be someone else in her life. Hiring a private investigator wasn't an option. I simply didn't have the money. I also couldn't spy on her at work, as I knew little about her office or her colleagues. Jenna worked as a legal secretary at a large law firm, while I worked at a bank. Our schedules were similar, making it difficult to follow her. One night during one of our online chats, I decided to steer the conversation to more personal territory. I told her my name was Lucy and that I lived in Florida. Jenna responded saying she lived in Massachusetts and worked as a legal secretary, handling contracts and paperwork for the lawyers at her firm. Then, she asked me what I did for a living. I made up that I was on maternity leave, but would soon return to my job as a bank teller. Jenna replied excitedly, saying her husband also worked at a bank as a programmer. Then she asked, "What's your husband's name?" This was going better than I expected. Jenna was sharing details I knew to be true. I replied that my husband's name was Lorenzo and that he worked in insurance sales. Then, we switched the conversation to cooking and other trivial topics. I didn't want to push her too much that night, but I planned to delve deeper into her personal life during our next chat. For the next 2 days, we couldn't chat. On the third day, I sent her an email saying my bank manager had called me for an emergency and asked me to return to work a week earlier than planned with extra pay. I expressed my excitement and nervousness about returning to work. This gave me an excuse to keep interacting and maintain her trust. I had decided to invent a story to tell Jenna. My plan was to make her believe I'd had an affair with a coworker at the bank. My goal was to create an atmosphere of trust in our online friendship, and, in doing so, see if Jenna would feel comfortable sharing any secrets with me, especially if she was being unfaithful. One night while we were chatting, Jenna asked me why I was scared to go back to work. I replied, "I'm not sure if I should share this, but I want to vent a little. I just hope you don't think less of me when I tell you what I did." Jenna quickly responded, "We all make mistakes. We're human. What happened? Did you steal something from the bank?" I laughed to keep the tone light and answered, "No, it's not that. I met a man at work, Robert. We started as friends, but then things progressed to another level." I proceeded to narrate my supposed story, a relationship of over a year with this Robert, how it all began with casual meetings after work, and how those meetings became something more. I described how being with him was thrilling, but that I still loved my husband and didn't want this affair to ruin my marriage. Jenna read the whole story without interrupting or asking questions. Honestly, the more I wrote, the more ridiculous I felt. I was almost sure Jenna didn't believe any of it. Finally, Jenna responded with a question that surprised me. "But you just had a baby. Are you sure your husband is the father?" I feigned devastation at the question and honestly replied, "I'm not sure. That's why he must never find out about anything." I wrote that I felt terrible and had to go because I was too overwhelmed to continue talking, leaving the idea hanging in the air. That night, when I entered the kitchen, I saw Jenna sitting in front of the TV, but it was clear she wasn't watching it. She was lost in thought, as if something was deeply troubling her. I sat next to her and took her hand. When she looked at me, I noticed her eyes were red, as if she had been crying. After a brief exchange, She suggested we go to bed. That night, we were intimate and held each other for over an hour before falling asleep in each other's arms. I reflected on our marriage and what I had done. The next day, I wondered if the fake friendship I had created with Jenna online was really being useful. On one hand, it had brought us closer that night. But on the other hand, I hadn't learned anything new about her. I thought I needed to build even more trust for Jenna to feel comfortable sharing her secrets with Lucy. Over the weekend, Jenna and I didn't communicate in the chat room. But on Monday, I sent her an email from work, feigning excitement about a supposed conversation I'd had with Robert. I told her that after months of silence, he had finally spoken to me, which made me very happy. That night, after putting the girls to bed, I went to my office in the basement, turned on the computer, and waited for Jenna to log on. When she did, I wrote excitedly, "I'm so happy to talk to you tonight. I have good news to share." Jenna replied jokingly, "Let me guess. It has something to do with Robert." I told her that Robert was excited to talk to me again, and that it seemed he still had feelings for me. Jenna read my message and then responded skeptically, "If he really cared about you, why didn't he call or try to see you these last 3 months?" I had thought about that. So I replied that calling wasn't an option because my husband had started to suspect something, and I was sure he was checking the phone bills. I also pretended that Robert didn't want to risk being discovered. Jenna continued the conversation and asked, "Why didn't you meet at a hotel like before when you were working?" I replied that it wasn't possible because I was pregnant and didn't feel comfortable with my appearance. Besides, I doubted Robert would want to be with someone in that condition. We chatted for about 30 more minutes. Although I tried to emphasize how special this Robert was, I felt that Jenna wasn't impressed with the fictional person I had described to her. On Wednesday, Jenna logged on again, and this time, our chat became much more revealing. After several minutes, she began to open up about her own problems. She finally admitted she was involved with someone else. Her boss, Jason, a married lawyer with a son. My heart skipped a beat. I had heard Jenna mention Jason before, but she hadn't mentioned his name in recent months. According to her, the relationship had started almost a year ago, during a work trip to Atlanta for a convention. Until then, I believed Jenna had attended with another secretary, but now I knew that was a lie. Jenna described how during their first night in Atlanta, after a group dinner, Jason had invited her for drinks in the hotel lounge. That night ended in his room, and although she initially felt guilty, they repeated the experience the next day, spending the whole night together. When she returned home, she distanced herself from him for a few weeks, but eventually gave in to his persistence and resumed the relationship. As Jenna continued to write, I discovered they used Jason's office after hours to meet. Over time, they started seeing each other in a hotel room once a week, in addition to sneaking around the office several times. Jenna confessed the affair had lasted over a year, and that they met 3 to 4 times a week, much more often than we were intimate. The rage I felt while reading was indescribable. I remembered all the times Jenna had avoided being with me, making up excuses, but now I knew that with Jason, she was always willing and excited. I asked Jenna if she had feelings for Jason, and her response was immediate. "No, I don't love him. I love my husband, but the physical connection with him is like an addiction." That confession hurt me. How could she say she loved me while betraying our family in such a way? When the conversation ended, I was emotionally exhausted. I excused myself, saying my baby needed me, and promised we would talk again in a few days. I closed the computer, but couldn't stop thinking about everything I had discovered. How could she say she loved me, and at the same time share something so intimate with another man? How could she lie to our daughters while living a double life? The idea that Jason was enjoying the best of Jenna while I suffered in silence filled me with rage. I decided I couldn't forgive her. My marriage was broken, and the only way to get revenge would be to fight for custody of our daughters. If Jenna lost them, it would be the most devastating punishment for her. My goal was clear: get a divorce, win full custody, and move away with the girls, even to another state if necessary. Jenna had to pay for the damage she had done to our family. I decided I would also inform Jason's wife about the affair and consider taking legal action against her workplace, as I felt it had contributed to the ruin of my marriage. However, my first step was to gather concrete evidence of their relationship. I pretended everything was normal around her, while Jenna remained absorbed in her secret life, not noticing my growing desperation. 2 days had passed since my last interaction with Jenna as Lucy. That morning, I sent her an email asking if she would be available to chat that evening. She responded affirmatively, and we scheduled to meet at our usual time. I had a list of questions prepared. I knew the answers would hurt me, but I needed to understand what she really felt for Jason and what her intentions were. That night, my computer was already on before the girls fell asleep. I greeted Jenna as soon as she logged on. She wrote, "What a relief to talk to you again. I've been thinking about our last conversation nonstop. I hope my words didn't make you think badly of me." I quickly replied, "Who am I to judge you? After all, we're both human. Talking to you has helped me a lot." Jenna responded, "I have no one else to share this with. I usually tell my husband everything, but obviously this topic is off limits." She laughed nervously before continuing, "Do you think he has any idea what's going on?" I replied, "What do you think?" Jenna answered, "No, he doesn't suspect a thing. He trusts me completely. If he found out, I would lose everything. He can get very intense, and I don't want to make him angry." I took the opportunity to ask, "You mentioned your husband had a vasectomy after your youngest daughter was born. Aren't you worried about getting pregnant by Jason?" Jenna assured me, "No, that's not a problem. I've been taking birth control pills since it all started with Jason. I keep them well hidden." She even explained in detail how she took the pills every morning while he was in the shower and how she kept them in a shoebox in her closet. I felt a mix of rage and contempt, reading how she managed to deceive me, and even enjoyed sharing it with her friend. Then I posed the most important question. "Are you thinking of leaving your husband for Jason?" Jenna quickly replied, "That's not going to happen. I love my husband and my family deeply. I don't want to abandon them." I was horrified by the casualness with which she described her affair. She seemed to see it almost as a game, as if she didn't comprehend the damage she was causing. I asked, "Don't you think you're neglecting your husband? He must feel left out." There was a long silence before she replied, "We still have intimate moments, though less frequently. But I don't think he minds. He knows I love him." I couldn't help but press a little more. "And you're not afraid that, given the lack of attention at home, your husband might seek affection elsewhere?" Her response was slow to come. "No, I hadn't thought about that. Now you have me worried." As the conversation progressed, Jenna almost excitedly told me about an upcoming trip to Atlanta with Jason. It was something she hadn't mentioned to me at home. That night, when we went to bed, we both had trouble sleeping. I was too enraged to try to talk to her at that moment. Jenna, for her part, seemed restless, constantly turning in bed. I decided to address the issue the next day. On Saturday morning, as we sat at the kitchen table, I started the conversation with a serious tone. "Have you noticed that our intimacy has decreased a lot in recent months? We went from being together several times a week to almost nothing. It's been almost 2 weeks since the last time. What's going on? Are you seeing someone else?" Jenna paused, her fork hovering in the air, clearly surprised by my direct question. In our 7 years of marriage, I had never approached anything so head-on. After a moment, she replied, "That's really offensive, Jack." She always called me Jack, but when she used Jack, it was because she was angry or wanted to emphasize her point. Her gaze was loaded with annoyance as she continued, "How can you question my loyalty after all these years? I'm juggling work and home. It's natural for our physical relationship to cool down a bit over time. It's unfair for you to suggest something like that," I replied, trying to stay calm. "I'm not accusing you of anything. But you've changed a lot this past year. Even our daughters feel it. They barely come to you with their problems anymore. Now they come to me." That seemed to enrage her even more. Her reaction became more intense. "I only have 24 hours a day, and I can't always attend to our daughter's every need. It's fair that you get involved too." But as she said this, her expression changed abruptly, as if she realized the insensitivity of her words. She had let it slip that she saw our daughters as a burden. Her face went from anger to anguish, and she quickly got up from the table and went to the bedroom. I decided to drop the subject for the moment. It was clear that any attempt at conversation would be futile. That afternoon, Jenna went out to do her weekly shopping, a regular routine for her. I suspected she was probably looking for something new for her upcoming trip with Jason to Atlanta. With her out and the girls playing in their rooms, I decided to look for the birth control pills Jenna had mentioned to Lucy. It took me a few minutes, but I finally found them in her closet, exactly where she had said, hidden in an old shoebox. Inside a small plastic case was a pack of pills in use and two more sealed, confirming she had been taking them for at least a year. This coincided with the start of her affair with Jason. I felt a mix of sadness, anger, and pity. How could the woman I had loved so much betray me this way? Where was the person I had married 7 years ago? I held the pill case as I reflected on our family's future. It was clear to me that our marriage was over. However, I knew I couldn't let our daughters be left in her sole care. The sadness gave way to desperation and then to a strong desire for revenge. A plan began to form in my mind. It was a dark plan, something I would never have considered in the past. Bitterness and anger had consumed me. Carefully, I took a pill from the pack and brought it with me. When I took our daughters to my mother's house, I then headed to a pharmacy where I spent over half an hour looking for what I needed. I bought two types of pills, round white ones for liver problems and baby aspirin, both similar in size to Jenna's birth control pills. That night, I compared the new pills with the originals. The baby aspirin fit perfectly in the dispenser, although it was a bit thicker. I proceeded to replace all the pills in the in-use pack with the aspirins. Then, I put everything back in its place and picked up the girls from my mother's house, hoping they wouldn't mention our visit. The following Tuesday, Jenna informed me she had a conference in Atlanta. She said she would be traveling with a secretary from her office, though she didn't specify who. While she was away, she never called to check on the girls or to talk to me. She didn't seem to care. The day after she left, I decided to investigate. I used a public phone to call her workplace and asked for Jason. I was informed that he was also out of town and would return the following week. I had no doubt they were together. When Jenna returned, she greeted me with a hug, as if nothing had happened. That night, after putting our daughters to bed, she led me to the bedroom. She tried to initiate intimacy with me, but I rejected her. I excused myself, saying I had a headache and was stressed at work. She became insistent and tried to be playful and bold. So I had to reject her again. Finally, she got offended and turned her back on me. I wondered if Jenna's actions that night were an attempt to compensate for not having called while she was away, or if she felt guilty for the time she spent with Jason. Perhaps she was trying to mend her harsh words about our daughters by getting physically closer to me. However, her gesture felt more like an attempt to fix things than a genuine act of shared intimacy. It disgusted me. In the following days, I continued our chats as Lucy. I pretended to rekindle my relationship with the fictional Robert, inventing stories of passionate encounters to provoke Jenna into revealing more details about her relationship with Jason. This strategy worked, and I discovered things Jenna had done with Jason that she had never done with me. She even gave me tips and situations I could try with my lover. Every detail was another blow to my heart. Her actions contradicted her words of loving me more than anything. I constantly monitored the birth control pills I'd switched, making sure Jenna was taking them every day. I noticed how the quantity in the dispenser decreased. A few weeks later, I noticed a change in her behavior. Jenna started showing more attention towards me and our daughters. She seemed warmer and more present at home. However, a few weeks after her trip to Atlanta, she came home one afternoon visibly worried. When I asked what was wrong, she burst into tears and locked herself in our room. My suspicions about the cause of her distress were confirmed when I discovered she hadn't taken her birth control pills in the last 2 days. Jenna was pregnant. She had stopped taking the pills, probably upon learning the news. Calmly, I swapped the altered pills for the originals I had kept in my office in case she tried to return to the dispenser complaining they weren't working. Things started to escalate quickly. I knew it wouldn't be long before the consequences of her affair began to weigh heavily. Jenna didn't confess her pregnancy or her infidelity, despite my attempts to make her talk. If she had admitted the truth then, perhaps I would have taken a different path. But her silence only strengthened my determination for revenge. Still maintaining my facade, I decided to continue gathering evidence. I planned to sue her employer for contributing to the collapse of our marriage. At the same time, I was curious to see if Jenna would share the news of her pregnancy with her friend Lucy. One night, I saw Jenna using the computer after putting the girls to bed. I quickly went down to the basement and logged on to talk to her. During the chat, Jenna shared details of her trip to Atlanta, even bragging about how much she enjoyed spending those nights with Jason. She admitted they had spent most of their time being intimate. I took the opportunity to ask if she would consider leaving her husband for Jason. Jenna insisted she would never leave me because she loved me. She clarified that her relationship with Jason was purely physical, with no emotional bond. But what impacted me the most was that she confessed to wanting to end her relationship with Jason and be a devoted wife again. However, she omitted any mention of her pregnancy. Did she really believe everything could go back to how it was? Did she think a year of infidelity and denying me the affection that was supposed to be mine could be so easily erased? That night, as Jenna slept beside me, I knew I was reaching the point of no return. Something had to change, and soon. Finally, Jenna confessed to Lucy that she was pregnant by Jason and that they planned to visit a private clinic for an abortion. She detailed her plan to travel in 2 weeks, intending to stay a few days to recover after the procedure. I documented everything she said, thinking about how to use it against her later. The next day, I took a day off from work and drove to the clinic, an hour away. I posed as Jenna's husband and confirmed her appointment at the clinic for the 14th of that month. I managed to get a written confirmation with the clinic's stamp. A week later, while we were having dinner, Jenna told me she needed to go to another important conference in Atlanta and would be away for 2 nights. She also mentioned it would be her last work-related trip. I didn't react as she expected. She was probably surprised by my indifferent response. I already knew her romance with Jason was coming to an end, and her decision to stop attending conferences only confirmed it. On Wednesday the 14th, Jenna left early in the morning. She gave me a farewell kiss before heading to the airport in her Toyota. I knew she planned to leave the car there and continue her journey with Jason to the other state. As soon as she left, I also drove to the clinic, making sure I had a clear view of the entrance. I drove at the speed limit, although I knew they would take longer to arrive since they would meet at the airport first. When they arrived, I managed to take clear photos of both of them entering the clinic together. Once they were safely inside, I left so as not to be seen. 3 days later, Jenna was back home. Jenna arrived that afternoon looking tired and was surprised to see me there so early. But by then, everything was ready. During her trip, I had spoken with my lawyer and visited the firm where Jenna worked. I requested a meeting with the firm's president and told him everything: my wife's affair with Jason, the pregnancy, and her visit to the clinic for an abortion. I made it clear that I planned to divorce Jenna and sue Jason, as well as take legal action against the company for not maintaining professional boundaries between bosses and employees. The president asked for a day to consult with his legal team and conduct an internal investigation. They spoke with other secretaries and verified my claims. Finally, we reached an agreement. The firm agreed to pay me $500,000 to avoid the lawsuit, as well as fire both Jason and Jenna. After long conversations between my lawyer and the firm's legal team, the documents were drafted, signed, and the check issued in my lawyer's name. After this, I filed for divorce, along with a restraining order to prevent Jenna from approaching our house or our daughters during the process. I included a letter in the documents warning her that if she contested the divorce terms, I would seek full custody of our daughters in court, ensuring she would lose all access to them. When Jenna returned home, she knew nothing about her impending divorce or her dismissal. Seeing me, she was surprised. "Why are you home so early?" she asked. I explained calmly, I took the day off because we need to talk. That's why I didn't pick up the girls from my mother's house. Jenna frowned, worried. What's so urgent that you needed to take the day off? She asked. I told Jenna I had discovered something a few weeks ago while fixing a light in our closet. I accidentally knocked over a box, and its contents caught my attention. I placed the shoebox with the birth control dispensers on the living room table and asked for an explanation. Jenna dropped her travel bag to the floor, her face paling for an instant, showing surprise before her expression quickly changed to panic. She sank onto the sofa, covering her face with her hands. Her body rocked back and forth, and she seemed truly desolate. Calmly, I continued, "So, my loyal and faithful wife, can you explain these pills? Why are you afraid of getting pregnant when you know I had a vasectomy after our second child? Unless, of course, you've been unfaithful." "I can explain. You're making this seem much worse than it is," she said, her voice trembling, eyes full of tears. Her lip quivered as her hands visibly shook, but I didn't let her pleas sway me. "Tell me, have you cheated on me? Have you been unfaithful? Because everything points to that, and now you think you can justify your deception." My voice was firm. "No, it's over now. I've always loved you," she replied through tears. "There has to be a way to fix this." Her face was soaked with tears. "How can you say you love me when you've had an affair? You've broken our marriage vows and betrayed our family," I retorted. She began a confession of her affair with Jason, albeit a very watered-down version of reality. She finished by saying that on this last work trip, she had ended her relationship with him. She fell silent, as if expecting me to accept her lies. I looked her in the eyes and said, "Work trip? That's strange. I thought your last trip was to a clinic to have an abortion." Her mouth fell open in shock, and her eyes reflected absolute fear. "Yes, Jenna, I know everything. But would you mind telling me the details I might have missed?" I asked. While she tried to speak, she couldn't form coherent words. Suddenly, she ran to her room, crying. I stood in the living room, debating whether to follow her, worried she might harm herself. But I decided to wait. Jenna remained locked in her room for 2 hours, crying. Finally, she showered and came out in a long dress. Her face showed the weight of her emotions, with deep marks of suffering. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, unable to look me in the eye. "I don't want to lose you. I'll do anything to fix this," she said with a broken voice. "I think it's too late for that, honey," I replied, reminding her of all the months I spent trying to get closer to her, while she reserved her affection for Jason. "I did everything you asked of me, but you denied me what was rightfully mine. You have sullied the love I had for you, Jenna. Now there's barely anything left." Jenna collapsed, burying her head in her arms on the table. "Forgive me, please. Tell me you still love me," she pleaded. In a calm voice, I insisted she reveal everything: the identity of her lover, how they met, and the details of what they had done. Jenna confessed, and her words matched what I already knew. She admitted her pregnancy, the abortion, and the multiple encounters with Jason, both in the office and in hotels. We barely spoke for the rest of the weekend. On Monday morning, Jenna received the divorce papers at her office. Shortly after, the president of her company informed her and Jason that they were both fired. Due to the restraining order I'd requested, Jenna couldn't return home. She called me at noon, devastated. Before ending the call, I informed her that I would take her clothes to her mother's house, as she had no reason to return to our home. I also changed all the locks. Later, I learned that Jenna suffered a nervous breakdown after our conversation and was hospitalized. 2 weeks later, she accepted the divorce terms. I agreed that she could visit our daughters for a few hours on Saturdays at my mother's house. 6 months later, our marriage was officially dissolved. Over time, Jenna seemed to be deeply depressed. Her mother told me she was in therapy, had lost weight, and rarely left her house. Gradually, I allowed more access to our daughters, including unsupervised visits and some weekends at her mother's house. But sometime later, my mother was diagnosed with cancer and could no longer care for the girls during my work hours. Jenna quickly offered to take over, but I rejected her proposal, worried about the emotional impact on the girls and the possibility that they would interpret her presence as a potential reconciliation. In the end, I hired a nanny to help me. A year later, I started a relationship with Maria, a childless widow whom my daughters adored. She was a colleague from work who had come over to the house many times over the past year. My daughters accepted her as a mother figure without any issues. Currently, I hardly see Jenna. I know she still lives with her mother. Deep down, I wish I really knew nothing about her. But until my daughters are of age, Jenna will be a background problem. Anyway, as long as she doesn't set foot in my house again, I don't care what she does with her life.